we're talking about solutions, honestly, they need to fix the administrative remedy program. On paper, it looks great. The problem is that the administrative remedy program starts inside the fence. So these guys, they want to keep it from leaving the fence. They don't want anyone outside finding out whatever your complaint is.
Over 1 million Americans face sentencing every year, and it will be the most important day of their lives. But we don't fully understand the system, how broken it is, and what we can do to make it better. I'm Doug Passon. I'm a 25-year criminal defense lawyer and a sentencing expert. My goal is to bring more awareness, more fairness, and more humanity to the sentencing process. So, are you ready? Then let's get set for sentencing.
Hey everybody, Doug Passon coming to you from Studio 3553 in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm talking very fast because my very, very special guest is back on the podcast, Bilal Khan. I have to talk fast because he's calling me from inside a Bureau of Prisons institution, and we're going to get cut off after 15 goddamn minutes. So we got to be quick, and of course we'll pick up this conversation maybe tomorrow and keep talking. But today, even though Bilal has written an amazing, incredible book, and I've done a podcast episode already about the book, and I will put that episode link in the show notes because it's called Surviving Pretrial, and it's freaking fantastic. And anyone who's charged with a federal crime especially, but not exclusively, should have a copy of that in their hot little hands. But that's not really what we're talking to Bilal about today. It's been weighing very heavily on my mind, the abysmal, unconscionable, just cruel and unusual level of punishment that is occurring inside the walls of the Bureau of Prisons. And we've been doing a few episodes just specifically on how badly things are going, how dysfunctional, how dangerous, how much indifference is happening inside the walls of the Bureau of Prisons right now. And people need to think real long and hard, judges, about the consequences of the sentences that they're imposing, especially when it comes to nonviolent first-time offenders. Do we really need to send somebody into the mouth of the lion under these circumstances with this amount of dysfunction in the BOP? So, Bilal, welcome back. Thanks for talking to me, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Sounds like you're doing good too, so that's good.
Well, I'm hot.
In the BOP,
I'm mad.
You know?
I'm mad, and I'm not even in there. I can only imagine what your level of frustration and madness.
Well, in here, inmates call the BOP backwards on purpose. Everything is backwards, and they do it on purpose.
Wow.
If you could think of some way to kind of mess things up or come up with the absolute worst way to do things, it's gonna happen here. It's
where does the on purpose part come in?
What did you say? I'm sorry.
I said, where does the on purpose part come in? Why would that be on purpose?
Well, it just feels on purpose every day. You go in and you ask a question, and then they tell you, oh, but go to another guy that has nothing to do with it. And it's the culture of the BOP is to keep you incarcerated and tell you no. That's it. That is their sole focus. And so anything they come up with, for instance, something as basic as, let's say, recreation. Okay, they say, here's a prime example. Where I'm at FCI Fort Dix, we are told that we cannot mix with two of the units on the compound outside, but we can mix inside. Inside there are no cameras, outside there are cameras. Oh, and then another backwards part of this, we can mix with them when we all have baseball bats. So, because when we're playing softball, It's like, who came up with this? And they say, oh, it's safety and security. Oh, it's safety and security to give everybody baseball bats. They can hang out with that, but they can't hang out around a track without baseball bats. Like, it doesn't make any sense, But so
you raised the issue of cameras. So I know we're going to be all over the boards here, but it really brings to mind the infrastructure issues inside. And you're not the first person to tell me that they have issues with cameras not working, which is obviously
this call is from a federal prison.
Safety hazard for inmates, but they also say it helps with guards and staff avoiding accountability, because when they do something wrong or abusive and there's no camera to record it, then it's just their word against the inmate's word. And of course, who do you think they're going to believe?
Right. Well, and what's interesting here, and this goes to the cameras. Congress, I didn't know this until 2 weeks ago, but in 2021, Congress enacted a law. It was signed into law that requires updating all of the camera systems and figure out how to close off blind spots and things like that. The article I read had to do with the rapes going on at the camp at Coleman when they had women there. Well, since then, I haven't seen any movement whatsoever about cameras in Fort Dix. And for many years, people have complained that there are no cameras inside the housing units, where it's the most dangerous, where the things like and I mean, it is a prison, and so there are people in here who don't follow rules, and there are people in here who are opportunists, and they will do what they can to bully other inmates and things like that. That happens in the housing units. It doesn't happen when people are playing softball. We've always said, ever since I've been here since 2016, and we've always said, we're like, this is extraordinarily dangerous. And they're like, oh, well, we can't put cameras in there. Sorry. We're like, okay. And, rumor has it the reason is because officers, their union gets involved. They don't want the cameras in here because they don't want to do their tours. They don't want to do their walkthroughs. They don't want to do the searching. They don't want to do anything.
And they don't want to be held accountable when they do something really bad.
Yeah, but on the flip side, it's not only that they don't want to be held accountable. We have one officer for 330 inmates. 330 to 1.
That is astounding. I mean, let that sink in to anyone who's listening, because you're not the first person to tell me that, but I remember when the first person told me that, and my knee-jerk reaction was, no way, that can't be true. And it's true. And
yeah,
so
the leadership, the leadership, they're working these guys to death. I mean, these guys are getting mandated overtime constantly. So the ones who actually are good and do give a shit, those guys, they get jaded very easily because they're like, I can go and work literally anywhere else, get paid more, and not be mandated to be there every day.
Yeah.
Right.
It's I hear there's double shifts. People are sleeping in their cars. They're burnt out as fuck. Like the morale is just. Well, talk to me about morale among the staff in general.
Okay. Well, so let's see. 3 years ago, just before the pandemic, a officer went into the parking lot and blew his head off. So that tells you something there. You have more and more officers engaging in criminal activity. I believe you've even represented some guys that, have helped smuggle cell phones and things like that. And it comes down to you're going to attract from the bottom of the pool, and the ones who are young and vivacious and they are interested, they're just like, well, I'm just going to go move to, let's say, ICE. And literally get paid more. These guys talk about it all the time, that the pay rate for an entry-level officer is the lowest in the federal system.
Tell me about the kinds of things that are getting into.
Fort Dix is well known actually throughout the BOP as being the cell phone carnival. It's I mean, there are cell phones all over the place. and it's reduced significantly over several years, but it used to be even way more. When I first got here, they were seizing 20, 30 cell phones a week from each housing unit.
Is there any other way that cell phones come into a prison probably but for the staff, the guards?
Oh yeah, I mean there's everything from drones to I actually just recently here we had a couple of inmates jumping a fence to go out and get packages and come back. We all joke now that Fort Dix is the only prison on the planet where people escape from to get back in.
Well, and I imagine that's easier to do when there's only one guard for 300 some odd inmates. It's like
sure. And then it goes to the camera thing. Cameras are only as good as somebody watching them. Right. So, yeah, I don't know who watches whatever cameras we have. I can't imagine it's many people.
It's so stupid. I think about cameras, and in my own house, I just went to Costco and bought a box of 6 different cameras, like they're all wired, and it's dirt cheap. It costs. Obviously, I understand institutional grade things at the BOP, but the truth of the matter is,
no. Make no mistake. They're not purchasing institutional grade anything in this place.
Well, ostensibly they should be, but I'm saying the cost has to be negligible, even if they were. There's no reason in this day and age, with digital technology and everything else, that there shouldn't be cameras all over the place. And when you say BOP on purpose, backwards on purpose, I have to believe that's by design.
Well,
it's got to be easy
not for nothing. The federal system, all the way from the FBI agents to the U.S. Marshals to ICE to whatever, the federal system hates cameras and hates recording. Anyone who's dealt with a pretrial case knows that in the federal system you will not find a recording of anything because they love the he said, she said.
That's actually very true. And in my jurisdiction in Arizona, interesting history, back in the day, I think it was back in Obama's tenure, but a guy named Paul Charlton was the U.S. attorney, and he wanted the FBI to record interviews because he was getting killed at trial because jurors understand it's so easy to do, and if they're not doing it, there must be a nefarious purpose for it. So he made a policy that the FBI, especially on the Indian reservation cases, had to record, and the FBI went ballistic, and Paul Charlton was out of a job after that. He's a very successful private defense lawyer now.
Well,
so
and think about it on a national scale. You have the White House, you have Congress. Everybody's saying that police need to wear body cameras. Yeah. Why wouldn't you have body cameras on your federal prison guards?
Right.
And that right there actually could have probably saved the life of an inmate that died 15 feet away from me.
Tell me that story if we have time.
Several weeks ago, our unit was quote unquote in trouble because one inmate decided to argue with a police officer. And when he argued with him, he tried to run away from the officer. So naturally, that means we locked down 330 people. And what they were doing is saying we cannot leave our rooms. And this is a low security institution, so the room doors don't lock. We have to leave our room to go to the bathroom and stuff like that. And the one officer, his office is down on the first floor. During this period, though, there were 2 officers in here. Oh, that's our 1 minute. But let's just finish this thought. They locked the door to our floor. And so we couldn't access the officer. There was no call box, no any way to notify anybody of anything. There's no cameras. There's no anything. So this guy who was feeling very sick, he looked at everybody and said, I don't feel good, literally dropped, started having a seizure, started gasping for air, and a few minutes later he was effectively dead. And, it was a horrendous sight. And it took a disabled inmate to come upstairs from the first floor. He hobbled up there and was like, oh, my God, and then came down and told the officer, hey, there's something going on. And he said, oh, they just want attention. And he still ignored it. It took 10 minutes for help to even call for more help. 10 minutes of screaming.
Yeah, I have a client who's at Petersburg camp, and it's a total shit show. You'd think a camp would be something a little more pleasant, but it's not. And there's violence, there's gang activity, there's drugs, there's alcohol. There's one laundry machine that people fight over, so people don't get their laundry done for days. There's no programming. My client has complex PTSD, and he can't receive counseling to save his life.
You know, a lot of people believe that camps are going to be better than a secured facility, but it's actually not. From what I've heard, I can't go to a camp personally, but from what I've heard from people who have come from camps, that the programming opportunities and the staffing levels are generally speaking better inside the fence than outside the fence. So camps are designed to support the near facilities. So let's take Petersburg, for example. You know, Petersburg has a nickname. It's called Sweetesburg, okay, because it's so awesome there. It's the sweetest facility on the planet. That's what everybody believes Petersburg to be. But the camp may not be on that level. Now, the low security facility, I know they had to reduce their population because they didn't have a chow hall for a very long time. They've been using FEMA trailers. They moved a whole bunch of them up here to Fort Dix. And
why didn't they have a chow hall? That seems like a pretty basic thing that you would need to have in a prison, a place for people to eat.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Some weather thing happened, and the chow hall, you know, it just was dilapidated or whatever, and it fell apart. So they brought in FEMA trailers. But, you know, the guys who came from there, they actually said, well, you know, the food was actually pretty good. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. But eventually it finally came out that, like, you can't keep using, you know, FEMA trailers. you need to actually fix this. So they reduced their population there, but people would talk about that Petersburg for so long had programs and things would move the way they were supposed to move and whatnot. So, you know, the camp here at Fort Dix, people complain about it constantly. You know, officers will tell you before people go there, they'll be like, I wouldn't go there. And you're like, really? Oh, man, it's extremely boring. You know, there's nothing to do. You know, it's just one building. That's it. It's one building. These guys just hope they get a job where they get to go do something.
Except there's no programming, there's no jobs, there's no staff to run any of that stuff there. There's one guard.
Well, and then the programming side of things, you know, the First Step Act, for instance, you know, created basically a statutory right to have rehabilitative programming. And, you know, the BOP it can't figure it out. And the reason is because of staffing. They're not attracting people to do it. The people they are attracting just want to sit in their office and don't want to do anything, right? Yeah. So, you know, it's actually the inmates who are doing the First Step Back programming, at least here. It's supposed to be officers and, like, you know, volunteers and this, that, and the other are supposed to show up and teach these recidivism reduction classes, but that's not what's happening. Inmates are the ones teaching them. So these credits that people are getting are you know, the fidelity of the program is only maintained by the people inside. And that is why your client has the problem he has. The facilities, generally speaking, they look to the inmates to run the prisons. Okay?
And this particular inmate, though, is actually volunteer because he has very special skills in the construction industry, and, like, he could teach some amazing courses, and they don't have the interest, they don't care to let him do that, or they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have a place for him to run the classes. I don't know, but they won't let him do that either.
Yeah.
This call is from a federal prison.
You know, the BOP is actually the best way to put this, and I've had to explain this to a few people. The people who work at the BOP are the equivalent of McDonald's employees. When you hit that Big Mac button, all that's coming out is a Big Mac. That's it. I don't know how to change it. I don't know how to do anything else. I just know that I hit that button, you have to pay your $4.99 or whatever it is, and here you go, here's your Big Mac. These people are trained for that. They don't use their own brains. A law passes. One would assume that people would be like, oh, a new law is out that affects how we do things. We need to make sure to we need to make sure to implement this law. No, they all like, until my boss tells me something, this is how it's going to be.
And the interesting McDonald's analogy, because I'm thinking back to my wayward youth, and there was, I hope, an urban myth, urban legend that all the employees would stand around the giant pickle jar and urinate in it. And I feel like that could be an apt analogy for the BOP too, because they're fucking pissing in the pickle jar every goddamn day. But my question to you is, because I know you wrote a book, you're super active, you do 2255s, you help inmates all the time with their legal challenges. What are you supposed to do about it? What would be your advice to a lawyer or an inmate to say, we need to challenge this?
Step one, and Alan Ellis talks about this, and Mark Allenbaugh talks about this, everybody who knows anything about federal sentencing talks about this. You have to deal with the minutia in the PSR. It's not just about the guidelines calculations. It everything. I just helped a guy who is a U.S. citizen. He went through the process. You know, he came from Dominican Republic, and he did the legal thing. He became a U.S. citizen. But the PSR said he was not a citizen. So they're like, you can't go to a camp, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't get transfers because you're not a citizen. And he produced a photograph of his passport. He produced a photograph of his certificate of naturalization. And the BOP's like, no. The PSR says you are not a citizen. I had to file an action in district court for that to get changed. Now, in the end, the BOP just changed it without responding to the lawsuit and all this. But it was in response to being served the lawsuit that it all got changed. And now all of a sudden, he's eligible for everything. And it's like,
well, that's a good first step that lawyers often overlook, that every word in that federal pre-sentence report matters, and you need to
It is the gospel. It is the gospel for the BOP. If it's in there, they take it as truth. They take it. It is, no matter what it says. It could say that your client is from Mars, and they will believe that he is a Martian.
Okay, but let's go back to this example of the client who comes into the BOP with a lifetime of complex trauma. We've argued to the judge that incarceration is going to amount to essentially cruel and unusual punishment by exacerbating his trauma. We've argued to the judge that the BOP is not equipped to meet his needs. We'd argue to the judge that every day is going to be exponentially punitive, and the judge still gives him 20 months for a contract bribe. It was the stupidest case in the world. But then he gets to the BOP. It's in the pre-sentence report. In other words, it's all well documented, but BOP is still ignoring his needs on every level. Then what? And, by the way, email after email to the warden and regional counsel goes ignored or just summarily dismissed. And you know the default with the BOP is, we're doing great. We're awesome. Everything is awesome. Everything is cool at the BOP. So, and then the judges just accept that as the gospel. And
part of I mean, this is kind of a minor segue.
Do you like that I wove in a song to our time?
Yeah, exactly. So there is one of the issues here is that the Supreme Court had said so long ago that the courts are just ill-equipped to tell prison officials how to run prisons, so they default to their quote-unquote expertise. They have no expertise. We have literally the least educated people, the least driven people who are going to get jobs in the prison system. I mean, who wants to work in the prison system? And so you end up with all of these people. Now, when a client shows up, though, when they get to the
This call is from a federal prison.
The first thing is honestly you got to swallow the pill of they're probably not going to listen. They're probably going to make it difficult. They're probably, it's extremely rare to find when you get to a prison to find the help that you need, no matter what it is, okay? But there are a couple of things that the Bureau of Prisons is deathly afraid of. One is suicide watch. If somebody makes a threat of suicide, they take it very, 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 very seriously, and it has to do with the Epstein thing and rape allegations. Those are the two things that they absolutely take very seriously. So what a lot of people have done, and I'm not condoning it by any means, but what a lot of people have done is when they can't get something done, they say they're suicidal, and they end up in suicide watch, and then everybody and their mother comes in and is like, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong? And then they start getting the things that they need. It's crazy.
Meanwhile, though, suicide watch is extraordinarily
it's very punitive. Yeah, you're given a smock and you're there naked and and watch 24 hours and and it could be a while before you get out of there. It's not a place people want to go. It honestly is ironic because in psychology they tell you the number one thing to prevent suicide is to get people to talk to their families and know that they're connected. But the first thing the BOP does is you can't make a phone call, you can't send a letter, you can't talk to anybody.
Yeah, total isolation.
Yeah, it's like, wait, what? But really, it's just I wish there was some way to say, hey, you're gonna get the things you need. You're not. It's not gonna happen. And you can write all the BP 8s, 9s, 10s, and 11s. The only thing I can tell people to do, the clients, you have to document. You have to use the administrative remedy process. Now the key is some people get kind of what's the word I'm looking for? They start attacking like dumb things that nobody cares about. Like, oh, you guys were 10 minutes late releasing the door for chow or something. Like, no, everyone's going to be like, well, what's the end result there? Okay, you're right, we were late, but the day's over now, and we can't fix that. So, it's you don't want to go after things like that. The administrative remedy program can be a double-edged sword too, because retaliation does occur. People who do not follow through with it tend to be the ones targeted the most. They'll do a BP 8 or a BP 9, which is at the institutional level, and then they'll stop. They won't do the 10 or 11. And what ends up happening is the officers will come and they'll start harassing their cellie or their roommate, by doing shakedowns and things like that, using the powers of their job to find things like contraband. So then those other inmates who are not, or who are, into nefarious activities, will pressure that other inmate, don't do this because I don't want the police in my stuff. So, it's like that. That's the kind of stuff that happens. But people who have legitimate gripes, especially with medical, psychology, things like that, if you have a legitimate gripe with them, do the administrative remedies. Because a lot of times what's going to happen is there's our 1 minute. Somebody somewhere is going to have to call them and say, hey, what's going on? And it at least just gets in their head. If you're still denied after that, if you use the administrative remedy program, then you at least have the ability to go to court. But if you don't use the administrative remedy program, it's all going to be dismissed. Okay. It's mandated by the Prison Litigation Reform Act, which, was signed by some of your friends on the left there, Doug.
Oh, well, let's not go there. I know we have 10 seconds left, and we're going to continue this conversation tomorrow, but I will say Bilal Khan's Surviving Pretrial, I'm going to put a link to the show notes because it's a great, great resource. Yes, he sings my praises in the book, but I'd be plugging it even if I wasn't in there because it's a really good resource. So we'll talk again.
All right. We'll talk tomorrow, Doug. Good talking.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.
This call is being recorded.
I thought long and hard last night, because of our 15-minute phone calls, but the best way to analogize the federal prison system for an inmate, and this is the epitome of sixth grade. It's just like you start in sixth grade, you go in, everyone has cliques. You don't know what table to sit at lunch. People are going to, puff their chests and be, whatever. And then the fact that remains is they're all adults, so then, things can get violent if it doesn't work out. But, really that's what a prison is like. It's like starting middle school. And, and that's how you have to approach everything. people don't necessarily know what's going on. Where do you find information? Like I know Alan Ellis in his federal prison guidebook, he talks about, and it probably is, other people with him, but it talks about do not ask other inmates about the rules, ask the officers. Well, that's just not tenable. The officers don't know the rules, first of all. And honestly, talking to the officers brings more heat to you from the other inmates because they assume immediately that you're telling on somebody for some reason.
Right.
So like, and not for nothing, the BOP, I think is what 60% of the people have told on somebody. So, so I mean, it is a valid concern if people are doing things in prison that are violations of the rules, or even worse, violation of federal law. But being able to push for your rights, it honestly takes learning not really what the rights are per se, but learning how to communicate effectively in writing. And the majority of people in federal prison are borderline illiterate. They have an education level of 7th, 8th grade on average. So when it comes to writing all of these things up and putting it before, the various lawyers and wardens and whatever, they're looking for ways to deny it. So if you have a medical condition and you go in there and you say, I have a medical condition, you don't know how to describe that medical condition in a way in writing to make them understand that it's very serious, they're going to assume it's not serious.
Right.
And that's the way that's the way the system is designed to work is, oh, well, sorry, you didn't say it right. So, and then to top it all off, then they end up in court, and then you end up with, people saying, well, you didn't do it right because you didn't say it right. And you're talking to somebody who doesn't have the vocabulary ability to have said it right.
Right.
It's and that's honestly the biggest problem in the BOP. If we're talking about solutions, honestly, they need to fix the administrative remedy program. On paper, it looks great. The problem is that the administrative remedy program starts inside the fence. So these guys, they want to keep it from leaving the fence. They don't want anyone outside finding out whatever your complaint is. If they're not following bureau policies, somebody up the chain might actually care about that. It's not common, but it might actually happen. So you have to go to somebody in here and you have to say, hey, can I get that BP-8? And they say, well, what's wrong? Oh, no, you don't want to do a BP-8 right now. And let's just see how it goes after a couple of days. And they stall you till you get past that 20 days, and after the 20 days, well, you're out of luck.
So once you fill out the proper form, though, is there not an obligation for them to send that form outside the fence and to the higher-ups?
I mean, I've personally seen them throw away a BP-8 before.
Wow.
I've physically witnessed it. So it's now as far as BP-9s and 10s. So the BP-9 goes.
This call is from a federal prison.
It goes to the warden's office. So the warden has every interest in supporting everybody, all of the staff within the fence.
Yeah.
So if you have a problem in the fence, they're going to be like, oh, there's no problem.
Right.
And then so then what that does is by the time you're done with the BP-9. All right, so if you look at the time limits, you're now at 45 to 60 days after the event occurred, on average. Okay?
Yeah.
So most people are like, I give up.
Right. And that's by design, too, just to beat you down until you finally quit. Yeah. Exactly.
It's, then to get to the BP-10, which goes to the regional director and this, that, and the other, all of this stuff, it is all designed to not get the information out to the right people. If there was, in my opinion, if the central office had an independent grievance body or something and said, all of them come to us, and we're investigating all of them. And they're going to end up with frivolous ones, and it is going to happen. But on the grand scheme of things, it would push the facilities to provide better services and better care and better, they would come into compliance with whatever minimum standards the policies have. they would learn them. Because then they would be like, well, this guy's just going to send a grievance, and it's going straight up to the top within 10 seconds.
Right.
But they don't want to do that. Congress could make it happen, but they're not doing it. They know that the BOP is broken. I mean, apparently over the last few days they've been tearing the new director, Colette Peters, completely up. She can't even have her staff respond to congressional inquiries, never mind, like actual problems. And, and she comes in and she's worried about things like officers' uniforms. They're supposed to switch their uniforms to look like Ranger Rick. And you're like, what? Why? Why is that a problem? Why are you fixing uniforms? Who cares?
Right. Seems like a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Right.
So tell me, okay, so this is really resonates, and it may be the theme of the podcast, but what you're speaking fundamentally to is a literacy issue, that the inmates do not have the language skills, the communicative abilities to speak the truth of their story.
This call is being recorded.
I've realized that there are two schools of thought in the BOP. And one of these schools of thought is what needs to be attacked by the leadership. Do prisoners come to prison to be punished, or is being in prison the punishment? The officers who show up and believe that they are here to punish somebody are the problem. They're the ones who come in here and say, you're not supposed to get anything, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that. I am going to yell at you every time I can. I need you to understand that you're being punished. Or is it the isolation from society? It's like everybody talks this nice game, from the director and, oh yeah, I'm going to fix the BOP, but nobody wants to actually fix it. Nobody actually wants to come in and say, we need to change the culture. And the only way to change the culture is to bring in a leadership that's going to show people what the idea of prison needs to be. If you're here, you can't leave. That's the punishment. But while you're here, we're going to use that time to, rehabilitative programming or whatever it may be. But as it stands right now, we're not going to end up with any of that because the people in the BOP that lead the BOP all come up from being a regular officer from 20 years ago.
Yeah.
This call is from a federal prison.
So they were taught 20 years ago how to do it wrong, and then we keep them all.
Yeah. And even though we have a new leadership at the very top, Colette Peters, who ostensibly came in with good intentions and good experience and a good philosophy about corrections, the culture is so ingrained. I don't know how she ever accomplishes her goals when all the way down the line.
I'll tell you how she accomplishes those goals is if she were to come out and start firing people. No, you can't do that. Like when you hear something like, oh, at the federal prison camp in Coleman, it's called Camp Rape because all the women are getting raped, and you have officers who are admitting it on during polygraphs for their jobs. Oh, we can't prosecute that right now, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Oh, because you admitted it for a job interview, and it's like, but you also have the complaining victim. I speak from experience that if the federal government wants you, they'll come and get you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we can't prosecute that today. What? Stop it. And then, like we have this problem here where I'm at Fort Dix where they say, all right, we had some guys jumping the fence and some other dudes, they, let's say wrestle with an officer and then they punish the whole prison. They say everyone's locked down for this. And we're like, you guys have a much more powerful way to deal with this. Prosecute the guy who assaulted the officer. Don't punish everybody else. You guys have that power. Call the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah, but then they don't get the divide and conquer mentality because if they punish the whole prison, then you guys will exact the punishment and the retribution on the individual who...
Exactly. And when we tell them that that's what's happening...
You know, they're like, no, that's not what we're telling you. You're like, you are telling us to police ourselves. You are telling us to do this. You are telling, and they say, no, that's not what we're doing. Okay, sure. You keep believing that, and you know, it reminds me a lot of A Few Good Men. Let's order the code red. You know, like, I mean, that's what it is. We're going to train everybody. You know, and Colette Peters could do something about this. Honestly, I think she should have spent the last year going to every prison personally.
You mean she hasn't visited Fort Dix yet?
No.
Well, I don't envy her. She's got a tough job, but I don't know how long she's going to stay in it either, because she's getting
that's also part of the problem. And I know that she's even talked about this, because it's not an appointment for so many years, and it's not confirmed by Congress. And one of the things that everybody, you hear the officers say, is she's going to be gone by the next president anyways. So I don't care what she says.
Yeah.
They don't care. They have no reason to care. You know, and so long as we keep the BOP managing itself from the inside without any oversight, this is what's going to happen. It's going to keep happening this way. You're going to see them wasting money. You know, they have golf carts. The officers have golf carts. They call them leaps, LEEP. And the reason they call them leaps is so on the budgets, the public can't figure out what it is. It's a golf cart. We have a $10,000 golf cart here.
Wow.
It looks like a Tesla.
What? And
yeah.
What's the point of it? Just
the officers drive it around. Yeah, they drive it around. You know, which, you know, I guess it helps them or whatever. But, you know, but then you also have other ones that are just broken. And then, you know, like you have things that, you know, we have a deteriorating building that's about 200 yards from where I'm looking right now. And it has a sign on it saying you have to wear a hard hat. Right next to that sign are all the bleachers we're allowed to sit at.
Wow.
You know, like, it's stuff like that. And no one seems to care. No one seems to do anything. And then when you bring it up to them, they say, well, they shouldn't have put the bleachers there. Okay. Whoever they is, you're in charge.
Right.
Move them. You know, like, and you know, it's and this is what people are going to experience when they come to the BOP. Now, with all that said, everyone's job when they come to prison, survive it. That's your job. Okay? And sometimes it takes going through the administrative remedy process to get the things you need. But sometimes you also got to swallow it and just say, you know what, I'm not fixing that today, and move on with your life. Because you're just going to drive yourself nuts. And if you want to have PTSD when you get out of here, start arguing about all of the minutia you're going to see problems with, and you're just going to keep banging your head against the wall.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, I tell people, when you have a real issue, go for it. But if it's minor and you can live with it, then live with it. Because you're just going to get told no. It's you know, now if you have real issues, go through the administrative remedy process. It's like antibiotics. If you don't finish it, it causes more problems. Finish the administrative remedy process. If you start it, finish it. Go all the way to the end.
Keep going. Sorry.
And if you do that, they're going to understand that you're serious, and they'll leave you alone. They might bother everybody else around you, but they're going to leave you alone. And I speak from experience. People tell me all the time, they retaliate against people who file paperwork and this, that, and the other. Guess what? I am well known at Fort Dix as the guy who knows how to file paperwork, and they do not bother me.
Which is why you have the courage to come on the podcast and speak openly to my audience of 9 million listeners. No, but you know, like a lot of folks would be afraid to speak their truth, and you're not, and that's because you've figured out the system and the way to navigate it. And on that note, you have mentioned that you are going to be kind enough to write up a how-to guide that explains the administrative remedy process to help other inmates and other things people can do to protect themselves in prison. So I am so grateful that you offered to do that. And just for people listening, once that comes in, it will be
on. This call is from a federal prison.
Yes, we know. It'll be on the show notes at www.setforsentencing.com under the episode, which I am quite certain is going to be entitled BOP stands for backwards on purpose. But, Bilal's advice to survive it is important, and it also relates back to the book, which is not about surviving prison, but it is about surviving pretrial. So Bilal recently published an incredible resource, and I'm not just saying it because you mentioned me in the book, full disclosure, but I'd say it either way. Surviving Pretrial, The Ultimate Survival Guide to Being Busted and Prosecuted by the Feds.
Well, and on that note,
yeah.
On that note, Doug, I do want to actually say that there is a resource out there about how to do time in the BOP, and it's written by a guy named Chris Zoukis, Zoukis. It's called the Federal Prison Handbook. This guy, he did a lot of time in, I believe it was Petersburg. Now he owns a consulting company out of California, doing quite successful from my understanding. I don't know the guy personally, but I've seen this book. It describes everything in the BOP and how to deal with everything. I believe it's about 500 pages. It tells you about everything about how the inmate economy works, to inmate politics, to how the staff act, to how to do the administrative remedy program. It is a very valuable resource, and I suggest people get it.
Okay, good.
A lot of families believe that, you don't want to do X, Y, and Z. This goes into all of those things. It'll talk about the reality of it all. And to all the families who aren't going to experience the inside of a federal prison. So, anyway,
that's a great place to end. But I would say it's not just going to be top down; it's going to be bottom up, grassroots. So we got a ton of great advice from you. Make your record.
Well, if Colette Peters listens to your thing, perhaps maybe she'll consider putting together inmate advisory boards at every prison.
Oh, I love that. So we learned a lot this episode. Make your record at any cost, including your administrative remedies, and follow through with that. Reach out to your congresspeople. There are still some there that actually do care and that are watching this situation and trying to change it. Lawyers, keep telling the story of the chaos and dysfunction of the BOP at sentencing in your compassionate release motions and every opportunity you get. Judges need to understand what's happening inside the walls of these prisons because they are misinformed. They need to know the truth. And together we're going to change this system. We can change this system. We must change the system. And you know what? Maybe we won't. And then, go read The Devil's Butcher Shop and The Hate Factory, as Bilal talked about, because if you don't make these changes, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good for anybody. We'll get another New Mexico prison riot. We'll get another Attica prison riot. We've got to change course, and we've got to do it now. That's the takeaway. Bilal Khan, thank you so much for coming on and speaking your truth today. Everybody go grab Surviving Pretrial, and we'll see you next time.
That's it for today, but before we go, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you to you, the listener, for spending time with us today getting set for sentencing. Whether you're a lawyer, someone who could use the help, or maybe you're just a true crime buff who loves the inside scoop on how this whole thing works, I am so glad you're here, and I hope you keep listening. If you're interested in knowing more about what I do, mitigation videos, case consults, live teaching, on-demand educational content, books, articles, all of it, please visit www.dougpassonlaw.com. I'm Doug Passon. Until next time, hang in there. Wait a minute, that's a stupid way to sign up on a podcast about sentencing. Hang in there. What's the matter with you, man? I guess they call that gallows humor. Sorry. All right. Well, I will see you next time on Set for Sentencing. Bye-bye.